Good day, grade 12. Welcome to Education in the Time of Corona. My name is Kwame Franch. I'm going to be presenting to you today one of the literature genres. The genre that I'm going to be doing is called My Children, My Africa, and it's a drama by Athol Fugard. And I'm sure that you've already covered it in class. Right, so what is a drama? A drama is a performance that is written for an audience. And how is it written? It's written in dialogue form. What does that mean? It's a conversation. It's going to be performed. So what happens? You get stage directions. And what do stage directions do? Stage directions, they tell you, first of all, they set the scene. They set the stage. So at the beginning of each act and scene, you'll have stage directions. That tells the characters where they must be. They tell you where the props are so that you can see that in your mind. Because remember, we are at school and we are reading the drama. But we need to be able to visualize it, and that is where the stage directions come in. You can make a note of this at a later stage, and I will also upload some notes in regard to that. Also, stage directions tell us about emotions that the characters are feeling. So you know the little brackets? That is what the stage directions do, okay? Okay, now, here we've got the elements of a drama, and that is essentially what today's lesson is about, okay? So what I've done is I've summarized it, and then we'll move on to the technical terms. So we have, in all the dramas, basically, when and where, time and place, what is the story about, who are the people involved, what do they do, what makes them behave the way that they do, what drives their action, what motivates them, what is the order of events, what are the universal messages, how do characters sound, and what do they feel and why? Okay, so this is an explanation of the basic elements of any drama. Now, what do the explanations mean? How are they going to ask you these questions? Let's move to the next slide. So, background and setting. This tells you time and place. Now, when I say time and place, okay, you can have historical background. So the drama that we are dealing with, which is My Children, My Africa, is set in 1984. So the historical background and setting is the apartheid era in 1984, okay? And the setting in terms of where it happens is at Zolile High School in number 1 classroom. So Isabel, Mr. M, Tami, which are our three main characters, that's where everything starts with them. Then we've got our subplot, our plot. What is that? That's the storyline. That is what happens, okay? And now, the next one is characterization and character. So, characters are the performers. And for this drama, we know we've got Tami, we've got Mr. M, and we've got Isabel. Now, characterization, very important, grade 12. It is what drives the plot. But what is characterization? So, when Mr. M steps into number 1 classroom and they are having the inter-school debate, because remember, that's where this entire thing starts. When they've got that inter-school debate, at some point Mr. M says, order. And later on, we discover that him saying order is in fact a precursor to how he views life. He feels that things always need to be done in an orderly fashion. So that is the precursor in terms of Mr. M's character, okay? Another thing in terms of characterization with regard to this drama, Tami. So initially, Tami is Mr. M's protege, and then he decides, no, Mr. M is no longer telling me what to do. Remember, I said plot, subplot, background, setting. Where is this happening? It's happening during 1984, during the apartheid era. It is happening, yeah, between a young black male and an older black male. Now, themes and messages. So what we're going to do is we're going to link all of these things. Now listen to me. We've got background and setting, we've got plot and subplot, we've got characterization. Now, what does theme and messages have to do with that? So what these people do, what these characters do, right? They interact with one another and they do things for a particular reason. So let's look at Mr. M and look at Tami. And Mr. M wants to do things orderly. Grade 12, I must tell you that everything in terms of the elements of a drama or any genre, the elements are what link the entire story together. So now I'm going to go back to my example about characterization. When Mr. M wants to tell Tami to do the quiz with Isabel, remember, he asks Isabel, will you do the quiz? And she agrees. And Isabel says, Mr. M, have you asked Tami? And he says, I will tell Tami. Then Tami says, not doing it, not interested. You are no longer telling me what to do. Now guys, that is a perfect example of the generation gap, because Mr. M still thinks that that authoritarian and traditional way of doing things is going to fly in 1984, during the time of apartheid, during the time of student protests, during the time when Tami decides to fight for equal education. Please remember, this drama is not about equality. It's not about freedom. It is about equal education for all. That is what Tami is fighting for. Okay, I hope you understand that. Now, dramatic irony. So sometimes, I'm just going to explain to you what that is. So sometimes dramatic irony is very, very necessary, and dramatic irony is often linked to dramatic purpose. So when Ethel Fugard wrote the drama, why did he choose to do it in a particular fashion? Why does Mr. M say the dictionary? Why does he stomp for order? That has got to do with dramatic irony, dramatic purpose. Why is he doing it? Okay, so the dramatic purpose is included here. So when you have dramatic irony, let me explain for those of you that don't know, and I'm sure you people watch series or you watch like little sitcoms. Dramatic irony is when the audience is aware of something that the characters are not aware of. So if somebody's eavesdropping, as an audience member, you know that, but the characters don't know that. Why would the director choose for the audience to know that, but not the characters? So do you see how dramatic purpose and dramatic irony is linked? Very important. Okay, so we've covered the most important parts of it. Language, style, and tone is just, are they speaking formally? The tone, what do the characters sound like? So tone has got to do with what they sound like. Mood has got to do with their emotions, what they are feeling. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. Right. So remember on the previous slide I chatted about subplot and plot. Now here it says Freytag's triangle, and that's exactly what it is. It's a triangle. Why? This is how it works. We have our exposition or introduction. Then we've got our rising action. So that's where things start to mount. Then we get to our climax. Now our climax is often the turning point where things just, they radically change and you think like, oh my word, what's going to happen now? Then after that you have your falling action, and beautiful French word, I think, denouement, just means conclusion, don't stress about it. Also, although they call it a triangle, sometimes the introduction is very short and the rising action is long, okay? So your triangle is not necessarily going to look like this. This is generic, means it's like an example, a template of Freytag's triangle. But I'm going to explain to you this triangle in terms of plot and subplot in our drama. So, plot and subplot in terms of Freytag's triangle. Inter-school debate at Zoledi High. Who planned that debate? Mr. M. Remember I mentioned here, I said on the triangle, I said introduction. So that's that. Okay? It is your introduction. Tami rebels against Mr. M and resigns from the quiz team. Rising action. Now remember, in the background, this happens. It starts the conflict, but something has led up to that. It's built to the point where Tami says, not doing it anymore. I've had enough of you, Mr. M. I'm fighting for my freedom, right? And in the next slide, this, most important, that is where Mr. M is murdered. Why? So, this is the climax. Now, the conflict has given rise to the climax, right? So now, remember, Mr. M becomes an informer because he feels, I'm an educator, I want to teach my learners, they must be at school, they must use their words. It's all about the dictionary and all about he says there are 26 letters in the dictionary and there are 60,000 words, and poets and authors have used these to bring beauty to the world. So I believe in the power of words, so much so that he becomes an informer. But now, his purpose, informer, very negative connotation. Do you understand about connotation and denotation? I'm going to explain 2 minutes. So informer, you have a dictionary meaning, which is the denotation, okay? But then you've also got connotation, which is how the word feels. So the word informer doesn't have a positive connotation. It's got a negative connotation. So Mr. M becomes that, according to the learners. But Mr. M's purpose was never to inform on them. Mr. M's purpose was to say, please, these are the children who are not coming to school. Please let them come. But that was not the outcome of Mr. M giving them their names. And when they discover that Mr. M had done that, the learners take him and they necklace him. They kill him, they put a tie around his neck, because that was sort of par for the course during that era, that time in our history. And he's murdered, and that's the climax. And he dies. And please remember, at this point, before the murder occurs, Tommy comes and he warns him. In spite of the fact that he doesn't agree with what Mr. M wants him to do, he still comes and he warns him, and Mr. M says, I'm not going anywhere. And he loses his life. Now, very important, I mentioned characterization. The fact that someone is willing to die for what they believe in. Okay? Character, Mr. M. Willing to die for what he believes in. What does that tell you about someone like that? Do you know anybody like that? Are you willing to die for your beliefs? So that should tell you clearly the type of strong character that Mr. M had. He was willing to say, no, Tommy, I hear what you are saying. I accept your warning, but I'm not going anywhere. I am going to stay, and I'm going to face the consequences. Now remember, when he informed on those learners, they were arrested. And then he realizes, oh wow, maybe it wasn't the best course of action. So he's not going to run away from what he's done. Okay? So as much as he is firm in his beliefs, he is also realizing that maybe Tommy has a point, and maybe sometimes we have to fight using other than our words. And he stays there and he's murdered. And he stands for what he believes in. Now, Tommy and Isabel meet. Both love Mr. M. When does that is now the falling action? When does that happen? So after everything happens, Mr. M is dead, Isabel and Tommy meet up again. And then they chat, and Isabel says, she doesn't know how to ask him because, look, they've become friends now. So Isabel and Tommy meet, both love Mr. M. That commonality there is part of what their friendship is based on. And that is one of, remember I spoke about themes earlier on? It's a universal message. It's something that we can all latch onto. So Isabel and Tommy, they love Mr. M, and that's now in the falling action. But what happens at this meeting is very telling, because she says to him, she doesn't know how, she says, I don't know how to basically ask you this, but were you there? Were you part of the mob that killed Mr. M? Because it's nagging at her. Why would, she's made friends with this man, or with this young man, he's 18 years old. Why would she wonder if he was there? Because that speaks to Tommy's character. He is very, very passionate. He believes that everybody should have equal education. And Mr. M, with that informer status of him, stood squarely in front of it. So now she's thinking, oh wow, was Tommy part of the mob? Was Tommy, and then he says, no, I wasn't part of the mob. I went there and I warned him. And there we have where they realize they both love Mr. M, and that is your falling action. Okay? And she says to her, Mr. M didn't want to take the warning, he didn't want to leave. And then the last one, Isabel and waar pats berg. And she says, the future is still ours. Now, grade 12. One of the other elements, background and setting, this is my favorite part of explaining the elements of the drama, because I'm so fascinated by the fact that this happened. So, set 1984 South Africa, I've told you that. So, in September of 1984, something very interesting happened. There was a new constitution introduced, and this constitution was called the Tricameral Parliament, as tri would three. So, colored people, white people, Indian people, they all had parliamentary representation. What does that mean? They all had a voice. They had somebody that could speak for them. Our black brothers and sisters, however, did not have representation, did not have a voice, could not say what they wanted, could not say what they feel, could not say what they needed, could not speak about their displeasure, had absolutely no voice. Very, very interesting, right? And also couldn't give input into their political future. So 1985, President of the country, state of emergency. What is a state of emergency? They bag organizations and meetings. So you couldn't belong to a political organization and you speak out firmly against something. It was banned. The media couldn't report on police brutality, government actions. Illegal. People could be detained. They didn't call it arrested. They said detained without releasing their identities. So go back to the drama. There's one scene in the drama where Mr. M sees a boy. And he's in a police van. And the boy screams, "Go and tell my mother." And for me, that was very poignant. Why does he say, "Go and tell my mother," when he sees Mr. M? He doesn't say, "Get me out of the van, get me out of jail, help me escape." He says, "Go and tell my mother." Why does he say that? Because people could be detained without their identities being released. So your child could go missing and you would not know where that child had gone. And you would have to make an assumption as a parent. And you, the person that's been detained, had to hope that someone went and told their family that they had been detained. And I think that you must just let that sit with you. Because remember, this is the time when Tami decides, I am going to fight for equal education, knowing full well he cannot belong to an organization. He can be detained without anyone knowing, and for political actions. So he was an activist, and the chances are that he could die for what he believed in. Now we ask ourselves, how different are Tami and Mr. M, or how similar are Tami and Mr. M in their belief system? Remember, Mr. M, power of words. Tami believed you must fight. But in the end, are they not based on this? Is Tami not also willing to die for his actions? And what does that tell you about his character? And that again informs the plot and how the story develops. Okay, so now, this for me, here, this slide, is at the heart of this drama. Bantu education, I said here, is at the heart of the drama, which is an example of state of emergency literature. What does that mean? Before I go here and explain to you Bantu education, I explained to you what the state of emergency literature is, right? So any literature, any piece of literature that was written, any genre written during this time is called the state of emergency literature. And so, Bantu education, this was an act that was passed legal in 1953. Remember, apartheid was passed legally in 1948. It became legal. In 1953, Bantu Education Act of 1953, what did that mean? So, more money was spent on white education than for people of color. So they didn't have fancy schools with swimming pools and a rugby field and a soccer field and all of those things. Okay, they had the basics. Educational facilities were racially separated. So you go to a black school, you go to a white school, you go to a colored school, you go to wherever. There was no intermixing, and resources were not evenly distributed. So now, because of this, so if you go back in the drama, there was a point where Tami is telling Isabel about when he was younger and the dreams that he had and how he wanted to just change the world and be this amazing person. And then he got older, he was at school, and he realized, but that's not true. He couldn't be whatever he wanted to be because Bantu education. It limited where he would be able to be one day. So he had, as a child, he had dreams. All children have dreams. And when he got older, he realized that purely because of his color and purely because of a political viewpoint and because of an act that had been passed, he would never realize his dreams. Remember, some people want to be teachers, some people want to work in a shop, some people want to be scientists and whatever. Tami had very lofty dreams. He wanted to do great things. And he realized that he wouldn't be able to realize his potential. And that is when he decided to take up the fight for equal education. So this is the law that Tami was actually fighting. Ultimately, this is what led to student uprisings. They didn't want to be equal to this and that. They wanted the child to prove themselves on a level playing field. They wanted education that was the same quality as every other person in the country. They didn't want to fight a war. They didn't want to kill one another. They didn't want to do any of those things. They simply wanted a chance. But it led, obviously, we know, to violence and to lots of different things. But ultimately, the basis of this entire drama is one young man's desire to attain what every other white person in the country had the opportunity to do. So they're chatting, him and Isabel, and she says, I want to be a journalist. And he realizes, I can't say that. I am limited in where I can go one day. I am limited in what I can do. And now, for me, it's just amazing that Tom is 18 years old, and I look at you guys who are 18 and 17 years old. Will you be able to make a decision like that for the rest of your life? Because remember, because Tommy takes this on, he has to leave the country. He goes into exile. The next slide speaks to that. So the future is ours. So this is supposed to be a picture of Waarpadsberg. I'm sure if you Google, you'll be able to find it. So this is, remember earlier I said, Isabel says, the future is ours. Waarpadsberg. Okay, so the future is not Tommy's. Is it? No, it's not Tommy's, because when him and Isabel meet, she goes here eventually and she says, Mr. M said, Waarpadsberg is where he realized. Okay, so that's the symbolism of Waarpadsberg. He realized what he wanted to do with his life, and he was all excited and, enthusiastic and youthful. And this is where Isabel goes to say her final goodbye to Mr. M, and she says, the future is still ours. But remember, Mr. M has passed on. Isabel is the only one left. Tommy has gone into exile. So Tommy has done what he needed to do. And now, because of that, he's being pushed out of his country. He's being pushed out of his home. He has to seek refuge elsewhere. And Isabel is here with this broken friendship. Mr. M has died, and she goes to this place, Waarpadsberg, which was very important to Mr. M. And she says, the future is still ours, Mr. M. Now, we know at the beginning of the drama, when Mr. M went to Isabel, he said to her, Isabel, we are kindred spirits. So basically, we connect on a vibey level. We feel each other. We understand each other. And when she goes here, and she says, the future is ours, she's saying, Mr. M, we are kindred spirits, and I will take forward your vision. So Mr. M believed in the power of words as opposed to violence. Not action, violent action. He didn't want people to fight and be all, murdered and whatnot. And when she says the future is still ours, that also ties in with the fact that what does she want to become? She wants to become a journalist. And how vibey is that, man? How kindred is that? Mr. M, right at the beginning of the drama, and I know that I'm going from left to right, but look, you guys have read the book, so we are just tying this all together for you now with this lesson. Right at the beginning, so they're having the debate, and Mr. M goes, order! And I said to you, that speaks to his character, right? And he takes the dictionary and he says, this is what a debate is, and he reads the definition of the debate to them. Now, keep that image in your mind. Mr. M, dictionary, debate, telling them what it is. And at the end of the day, Isabel telling them, I want to be a journalist. And then she goes here. She says, the future is still ours, Mr. M. So they share a common goal. What is the meaning of that? I've given you just one or two interpretations. It could be made by Isabel. It could be interpreted in different ways. How? Isabel and Mr. M, how she would take his vision forward. And I've just linked that for you in terms of her wanting to be a journalist and him and the dictionary and words and the power of words. And Isabel, as a journalist, would be able to do that. She'd be able to take those words, those 26 letters, those 60,000 words in the dictionary, and she would be able to take forward Mr. M's legacy of non-violence, of using your words. Also, there were fellow South Africans who wanted to make a better future through dialogue, through integration, through education. And this wasn't just black people or white people or pink people. This was South Africans, fellow South Africans who shared both Mr. M and Isabel's vision. But now, let's just go back quickly to Tommy and why he chose to go the violent route. Now, this particularly grade 12, we are focusing now on character and characterization, which is one of the elements of any drama. So, Tami starts off by being very in awe of Mr. M, and he listens to Mr. M religiously. And then he gets to the point where he decides, I cannot allow Mr. M to dictate because we disagree. And he takes up arms and he becomes an activist. And he fights in the streets with his comrades for, remember, not freedom, for quality education, for equal opportunities to attain one's dreams. Remember, I said, Bantu education, and that act passed in 1953 is at the root of Tami's actions. He doesn't want Bantu education. He wants equal education. And they realized, Tami realizes, you know, sometimes words are not enough. And this is one of the themes that we have, which is the generation gap. Because Mr. M, by and large, says words are enough. There's a scene, and I'm going to deal with that in the question paper because I've got a little resource for you, which will be uploaded. It's the 2019 NSC exam. I'm going to be covering the drama and the short stories. So I've uploaded the questions and I'll deal with it. But there's a very interesting little thing that's stated there. And Mr. M, and in the question paper, Mr. M is in the classroom and he's chatting to Tami. And in his one hand, he has the dictionary. And in his other hand, he's got the stone. And these two things are symbols of what? What is the dictionary a symbol of? Remember, the first book that Mr. M bought when he became an educator was a dictionary. I'm just going to move to the next one to show you the questions. Okay, and I'm going to read it to you, the question, and I'm going to deal with the memo. So, the first thing Mr. M does is he buys a dictionary. And he stands there and he says, this is a dictionary. And look, they are in his hands. Imagine that. Here you've got a dictionary and here you've got a stone. And he says, this one, the dictionary, has 26 letters. And I know I've repeated this countless times, but I think it's vital that you understand the importance of that in this drama, because that speaks to the heart of Mr. M. He says there are 26 letters, 60,000 words, and people have used this to change the world. And what is this? This is a stone. What can this do? It wreaks havoc. It doesn't build. It doesn't change things. It just destroys things. So you've got these two things, and he can hold them both in the palms of his hands, and he's looking at what you can do with one, words and the dictionary, and what you can do with a stone. What can you do? Even if you use a stone to build, you need other stones. But words they change, they stay forever. They are indestructible. They come alive. They change things. Okay? And that is essentially what Mr. M is about. Okay, so I've spoken about stage directions, character, and theme, and then this open-ended here. So basically, it's very important, grade 12, as much as you know the drama, if you don't know how to answer exam questions, then unfortunately it's not going to work for you. So you need to know. So what I've done is, and this will be available, this is the question paper, I've highlighted certain ones and I'm going to discuss with you how to answer them because, like I said, exam skills are very important. And why do I think I know how to answer this? Because I mark this paper at the end of the year and I've seen what our learners do. So I'm going to give you some tips from somebody who knows what she's talking about. So 414, the question states, refer to line 10 and 11, and then the question is, if you were the director of this play, what would you tell Tami to do while saying these lines? So what is Tami saying? He says, you won't find it there. I don't want to leave any part of me in this classroom. So this is the scene where Isabel is saying, and whose desk is that, and whose desk is that, and what, and Tami says, my name is not here. I don't want to leave any part of myself in Zolile High number 1 classroom. Now the question, how is the question asked? What would you, as the director, tell Tami to do while saying these lines? What is that question about? It's about stage directions. And I spoke about that right at the beginning where I said they set the scene so that they tell you what's happening, where everybody is, but also how the characters are feeling. Now, how do we answer a question on stage directions? So, you want to say the person is angry, but you can't say angry because how is the character supposed to portray anger? So you're going to say, you're going to use two things. You're going to use body language, okay, and facial expressions. So, if the emotion here in this question with stage directions is anger, you want to say Tommy is angry. This is what you're going to say. You are going to say, Tommy is going to frown, and this is how he frowns. And he is going to stomp his feet. So you've used two. You've used facial expressions. You've used body language. He's going to pound his fists. So always, grade 12, please do not say facial expressions and body language. You have to say, what is the face doing? What is the body doing? Is he standing arms akimbo? Is he frowning? Is he smiling? Is he laughing? Is he flying? What is he doing with his body? What is he doing with his face? Okay, the next question, which is 4.6 and still 2019 NSC. The question says, what does this extract reveal about Mr. M's character? Remember, I've been going on about dictionaries and words and stones and all of that. 4.2.6 has got to do with that. What does this extract reveal about Mr. M? You know what, I love it so much, I've actually highlighted this. So he says there, he says, 26 letters, 60,000 words, the greatest souls the world has ever known were able to open the floodgates of their ecstasy, their despair, their joy, using what? 26 letters, 60,000 words. So what does that reveal about his character? That's how they ask that question. Now remember, I said character, characterization. So what people do and why. So when we see that Mr. M says this about the 60,000 words, what does that tell you about his character? Clearly, he believes in the power of words. He believes in communication. He believes in non-violence. He deplores violence. He believes that through communication and talking, we can sort of fix everything. Okay? Then 4.2.8, which is another exam skill, and that is the ability to answer an open-ended question. The question is, the play ends on a hopeful note. Discuss your view. Now remember, I said to you in the previous slide, Isabel says the future is still ours. And I explained to you Wapaksberg, and I said to you the different meanings that the statement could have. So for 3 marks, you should be able to focus on those things. The fact that Isabel, journalist, will be able to write the words, will be able to take forward Mr. M's legacy, will be able to inspire other South Africans, fellow South Africans, to work towards speaking about problems, communicating, and laying these things to rest without fighting about it. Okay, so you need to know what people do so that you can answer the question on character. Then, 4.2.8 is the open-ended question. Okay, so how the play ends. You must be able to speak about that. 4.2.7, theme. Friendship is one of the 3 themes in this play. Grade 12, very important to remember. Your exam instruction must be read carefully. If it says that it is a theme in the play, you are then allowed, it's fair game, the whole drama, fair game. If, however, they say that you need to refer to the extract, you cannot borrow from the rest of the text. You need to go and find examples from that particular text. You cannot say anything that is not there. Now remember, a literature paper is answered in context. So they are not going to ask you to just give your opinion. You need to give your opinion based on what is happening in the text. Always ground it in the text. So quick tip on how to be able to analyze these questions. The sentence will tell you what to do. So, the play ends on a hopeful note. Discuss your view. What must you do? You must discuss. What is the limitation? So you have an instructional verb. You look in any question paper, you look for your instructional verb. You find it. The instructional verb, 4.2.8, discuss. What must you discuss? That the play ends on a hopeful note. What? That is your content. What is your limitation? You must look at the entire drama and not just at this act, this scene, this extract. So 3 things when you get a question paper and you have to deconstruct the question. The first thing that you do, identify your instructional verb. Then you look at your content, what must you answer about, and then you look at your limitation. What are they saying are the parameters of that question? Grade 12, I think that is enough for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening and participating wherever you are. I will see you next time, and then I'm going to do a little presentation in more detail than what I did today on the drama, My Children, My Africa, and then we'll continue with some short stories. But for today, thank you and goodbye.